what is taught about climate change? This topic that I'm speaking upon is part of my PhD project, which is the climate debate or the debate on climate change within U.S. American evangelicalism. To come close to understand this whole big subject for today, I will look at four different aspects: U.S. American politics and evangelicalism. What is evangelicalism, or what do we mean when we talk about evangelicals? Then the restructuring of U.S. American religion, and basically as a example of how it is being taught and talked about climate change within two groups that are working within evangelical circles. We are looking at Young Evangelicals for Climate Action and the so-called Cornwall Alliance. I will start with U.S. American politics and evangelicalism, because the topic of climate change cannot be looked at without looking on the bigger picture, which the social and cultural surroundings influence the whole debate within U.S. American evangelicalism. We cannot make the assumption that this debate on climate change, which is happening within evangelical groups, is purely based on theological and biblical grounds. They are intertwined within the debates that are being held as in the nation as a whole. To show this, for instance, with how do evangelicals vote, we can look at that white American evangelicals face the same range of duress that other Americans face and rely on the same cultural resources to respond to them. Their politics are as multifaceted as any groups, emerging part from religious concerns, i.e. opposition to abortion, and in part from a range of economic and social political ones. Marsha Pelly actually shows in her book from 2020 that the number one reason that in the 2020 election, white evangelicals voted Republican was not the topic of abortion. It was actually the topic of the economy. So we need to understand that this voting patterns and discussion patterns are happening in multifaceted, and it's not just one singular vote. At the same time, 1 in 4 Republicans considers climate change a major threat. That's what the Pew Research Center found out in 2023. And here, just to show this statistics, is that the Democrats and the Republican-leaning voters are actually quite divided on this topic. So when we then even look closer into what the views of climate change, we can see that white evangelicals are the group of people that at least believe that that climate change is man-made, and they are also the biggest group in saying that topics of climate change does not influence their votes. So we need to look at it from this this aspect, that this is happening not just within evangelical circles, but also in broader sense of the U.S. Society. Now, when we talk about evangelicalism, what do we actually mean? Because evangelicalism is, as Marston has put out in 1986, evangelicalism is certainly not a denomination in the usual sense of an organized religious structure. It is, however, a denomination in the sense of a name by which religious groupings are denominated. What this means that we don't have one group, one central body that governs what evangelicalism actually is. It is actually many, many groups, often grassroots orientated. And for this talk and for my thesis, I'm going towards along Babington's quadrilateral, where he has marked out 4 different major factors that are prominent to evangelical thought. And this is conversionism, activism, biblicism, and crucicentrism. Quote, there are 4 qualities that have the special marks of evangelical religion. Conversionism, the belief that lives need to be changed. Activism, the expression of the gospel in effort. Biblicism, a particular regard for the Bible and what may be called crucicentrism, a stress on the sacrifice on the cross. Together, they form the quadrilateral of priorities that are the basis for evangelicalism. So, evangelicalism actually appears in many different denominations. This could be the Baptist, Southern Baptist, Mennonites, could also be Methodism, where evangelical groupings can form. Historically, and this is very, very important and cannot be stressed enough, evangelicalism has influenced the U.S. societies since the founding of the USA. Classical evangelicals would be considered as anti-monarchist, anti-federalist, Jeffersonian, Jacksonian, and opposing bankers and landlords. What they mostly stress upon is a personal relationship with Jesus, which means that they distinguish they're not interested in building a mainline church or an organization, but it is important that they have the freedom to have their own form of religion. And this is where we need to understand that evangelicalism grew within the context of the U.S. And because it's grown within the context in the U.S., its political activism has been there from the beginning. And this will lead us to the next part, and that is the restructuring of American religion. American religion or a religion in America has, of course, been always a vital part. It's of a Protestant age, also from times of Catholicism on the coast and Judaism. Religious groups have always influenced the debates on the political sphere. But the interesting thing is that in the 20th century, a huge change has happened. Robert Wuffno has said it in this way, that in saying that American religion has undergone a restructuring, I mean to suggest that it, to some extent, has been remolded by the force of changes of larger society. Just real quick, what he means by larger society is the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s, the central government overtaking more and more regulations, and third of all, the Supreme Courts and its rulings. Especially the Supreme Court rulings is where evangelicalism in the modern sense since the 60s and 70s has started to work politically. Here we always think of the pro-life movement and the anti-abortion. Actually, it did not start with that. It started mainly in the 70s with a different court's decision where it was Brown and the Board of Education that allowed people of color to attend public schools that were formerly just white schools. Within these changes that happened in the 60s and 70s in the U.S., the changes was felt as a huge duress. And in finding an outlet for this duress, they have evangelicals have mobilized themselves in so-called, this is important, not STGs, but SPGs, special purpose groups. These special purpose groups actually try to make lobby work for different actions, and within what happens is it doesn't matter if you are part of a denomination or not, as long as you are part of this purpose, of the cause, for instance, to fight for climate change or to fight against climate change, you can be part of this group. And this has in whole led to a huge restructuring, that it is not anymore a division between denominations. Where it used to be maybe Methodists against Baptists, we now have a significant degree of difference within denominations, even within local congregations. Wolfno then basically points out that through this we can actually change from always looking at just focus on certain denominations. We can actually look at liberal and groups and conservative groups of American Christianity. And these special purpose groups that have enforced this change actually also have revitalized U.S. Religion and activated members to participate in the political debate. In short, special purpose groups have not only increased the prominence of relative to denominations, but also have become more distinctly separate from denominations in origins and sponsorships. So basically they work over interdenominational, they put people together and they activate them. It is and has become an outlet for making an effective action where people have felt like that life has changed and gone past them. So when we think of US American Christianity and climate change, especially evangelicalism, this oftentimes comes to mind: deniers. There is no climate emergency, it's a hoax. It is something that is just made up so that the government can make new regulations. This is an important set of thinking. Government can make new set of regulations. But in my PhD project, I've actually found out that, especially in the 70s and 80s, conservative groups were more into helping or enforcing the topic of climate change, that this is a topic that needs to happen. For instance, Francis Schaeffer, a thinker of the 20th century that is still read by a lot of evangelical members of evangelical churches, wrote a book called Pollution and the Death of Man, which was originally published in 1970. This book was actually basically trying to write an answer to Lynn White's indictment of American Christianity, who said that Americans only think of the earth as a source that needs to be domained. But actually, Schaeffer tries to show in his reading of Romans 8 that Christianity should take care of the earth, and that it actually needs to become a more prominent topic within the evangelical world. His whole argument is actually structured very close around the evangelical trademarks, which is the Bible, and especially crucicentrism. And I quote, "On the basis of the fact that there is going to be total redemption in the future, not only of man but of all creations, the Christian who believes the Bible should be the man who, with God's help and in the power of the Holy Spirit, is treating nature now in the direction of the way nature will be then. It will not be perfect, but there should be something substantial, or we missed our calling." And in the early 2000s, climate change was not a big debate within the US evangelicalism. There was actually even a movement called What Would Jesus Drive, which kind of plays into what was Jesus do, and was actually a calling that conservative and liberal Christians could get behind. But this was also part of a broader talk in the society. If we look at this screenshot, I know it's a little blurry, we can actually see Nancy Pelosi, who used to be the Speaker of the Democratic Party of the House, and Newt Gingrich, who used to be a Speaker of the House from the Republican Party, made a commercial together in 2008 saying that we need to take care of the climate. We need new regulations. Climate change needs to happen. Climate change needs to be stopped. Actually, even saying we disagree on policies, but we agree on what we can achieve together. Now, this basically has shifted since 2008, and one of the reasons is the rise of the Tea Party and the rise of furthering the division between Republicans and Democrats. So we have, for instance, when it comes to special purpose groups and climate change, we have, for instance, Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. These are young evangelicals that promote the topic of climate protection within churches. They structure their argument a lot on Bible studies, readings from Genesis to Revelations. They create videos, books, appear on podcasts, and always talk about how we need to care for the earth because it is also a way of showing that we love our neighbor. This rationalization actually takes the scripture from Jesus' word, from loving thy neighbor, and says we need to love our neighbor, even the one that we can't see right in front of us. These young evangelicals actually work very, very hard to promote this topic. On the other side, we have the Cornwall Alliance, who sees that in regulations for climate change, especially from central government, is a backdoor of Marxist over-regulating. They, as you can see here, they even have a blog post with why young evangelicals are in danger in becoming puppets for climate Marxism. And they've had a huge what's the word? Huge campaign called Resisting the Green Dragon, where images of communism that is coming in through the back door is always being proclaimed if the government puts in more climate regulation. And what their argument is often structured around is dominion, taking Genesis 2, that man shall have dominion over earth, and stretching on that verse that they say we are not supposed to take care of the climate, we are allowed to rule over it. And that is just a brief observation of the topic of what is being taught on climate change. Thank you very much.